Today we have a seminar together with the SORI Information Technology Park, the Science Publishing Cluster, the Association of Lithuanian Serials, Vilnius University, and the Martynas Mažvydas National Library of Lithuania. And we are continuing the event cycle designed for the scientific publishing community. And now invite to take part in the second online seminar. The topic is using digital identifiers in increasing the dissemination of scholarly publications. And aš kieno balsą girdžiu labai, gal galite įsijungti mikrofoną. And for a start, I would like to invite Vice Rector of Vilnius University, Prorector for Research, Professor Edita Sužiedėlienė, for some greeting words for the participants. Please, Edita.
Great to welcome you to this seminar on this winter day. Actually, it's beautiful winter in Vilnius, and great to see so many attendees. I would like to especially welcome our international guests and speakers, and hope this seminar actually is very much awaited for our librarians, scholars, and academicians. And I think today will be actually many fruitful discussions and talks about digital objects identifiers, and also on other things of digitalization of our academic publishing and academic work. Now I would like to switch to Lithuanian language, since I see that many attendees are actually Lithuanians, and I will tell just a few words about the importance of the seminar to our colleagues. Mėly kolegos, mėly svečiai, iš tikrųjų labai džiugu matyti, kad seminaras sulaukė tokio gausaus dalyvių būrio, ir tai yra tikrai puikiausias paliudijimas, kokia šiandien yra skaitmeninių įrankių svarba mokslinės informacijos identifikavimui, sklaidai, pasiekiamumui. Iš tikrųjų, pastarąjį dešimtmetį akademinio publikavimo mastai, puikiai visi žinom, išaugo iki didžiulių apimčių. Ir per metus skaičiuoja virš, beveik turbūt dabar jau apie 3 milijonus publikacijų per metus. Tai šią dinamiką tikrai labai gerai galima apibūdinti informatikos mokslų ir duomenų mokslų profesoriaus Peter Jackso žodžiais, kad iš tikrųjų judam į metaduomenų meganetvarką. Tai aš ją galbūt perfrazuočiau, kad judam iš tikrųjų ne į mega, o į tera netvarką. Ir tokiam kontekste skaitmeninių objektų identifikatoriai yra plačiai ne tik leidėjų, ne tik mokslinės informacijos teikėjų, administratorių atpažįstamas ir pripažįstamas įrankis, bet ir aišku akademinės bendruomenės, kaip įrankis, tuo pačiu investicija į mokslinių duomenų citojamumą, į mokslinių darbų atpažinimą ir tų darbų poveikio didinimą. Tai iš tikrųjų kitas unikalus skaitmeninis įrankis yra autorių skaitmeniniai identifikatoriai. Ir tas įrankis suteikia galimybių jau čia tyrėjams. Tos galimybės yra susijęti savo tyrimų publikacijas, duomenis, mokslinius projektus, kitus mokslinės produkcijos objektus ir taip didinti taip pat tyrėjų veiklos matomumą, greitesnį tarptautinį vertinimą. Ir aišku, skaitmeninių įrankių nuolatinis tobulinimas, jų funkcionalumas ir atvirų priemonių ypatingai didinimas panaudojant tos įrankius tikrai prisideda prie didesnės mokslinės informacijos sklaidos ir nebejotinai daro poveikį akademiniai veiklai, didina ir atvirojo mokslo galimybės. Tai Tikrai tikiuosi, kad šiandien seminare bus diskutuojama ir aptariama tų įrankių tobulinimas ir jų galbūt naujos galimybės ir funkcionalumo galimybės, kurios tiek leidėjams, tiek mokslo informacijos teikėjams, galų gale mokslo administratoriams ir tuo pačiu ir tyrėjams suteiks, turbūt galėtų suteikti naujų galimybių. Tai tikrai linkiu darbingo seminaro, linkiu sužinoti naujienų ir aišku, tas naujienas be jokios abejonės kuo greičiau integruoti į sistemas, kad nauji geri dalykai tikrai pasiektų tiek mokslo, tiek akademinę bendruomenę, tiek ir leidėjus bei mokslinės informacijos tiekėjus. Tai linkiu gero seminaro ir sėkmės visiems. Ačiū.
Tęsime savo seminarą. So we now continue with our two main topics of a seminar. We have one topic right now, and at 11:10 we have a short break, and 11:15 we will continue with the second topic. And now for our first topic, which is when you register content with Crossref. What does that mean? I would like to invite the speaker, the Crossref Community Director, Rachael Lammey. Sorry for pronunciation.
For the introductions, and let me share my
question in the conversation tab, or just ask the questions after the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, you have snow, beautiful winter day. In the UK, it's grey and raining, but I think I think from what you hear about British weather, you would expect that. But thank you very much for the invitation to speak today. And I'm going to talk about Crossref, our services, and how you can make sure that any content that you register with Crossref is able to be found and used as widely as possible. As I said, I'm Rachel and I'm head of special programs at Crossref. You can ask questions in the chat, or you can get in touch directly. And I'll give you other means of getting in touch with Crossref and asking any questions and getting help during the presentation. Our mission as Crossref is to help make research outputs easy to find, cite, link, assess, and reuse. And that's all different types, from journal articles to preprints, books, book chapters. So it's not just limited to journals. We're a not-for-profit membership organisation, and we're trying to make scholarly communications better. In terms of the size of our organisation, we work with over 12,000 members from all over the world. And we report to a board of members, which is a cross-section of international publishers. And we've had VGTU represented on the board. So Lithuania has been, represented there. And that helps drive our direction in terms of what we do. That comes from our members. We have a metadata store, so over 121 million items registered with us. And what I want to talk about today is that the DOI, or the DOI, is just the start. It's the metadata that's registered with that, and other services that we provide that help to ensure that information on your publications gets registered, linked, and distributed. Part of doing that is that we preserve the metadata that we receive in the long term, and we make it available via our open APIs and our search interfaces. So if you just registered information with us and we just we just kept it in a closed database, that wouldn't help your publications achieve their aims. We need to make sure that systems can find and use that information, and therefore the research that you publish. And we see 630 million queries per month across the different interfaces that we have. So that's people coming and asking us for publication information. So you can see that getting your information in Crossref means that lots of people want to use it. In Lithuania, we have 31 participating organizations, mostly universities, societies, and individual journals. Our first member from Lithuania joined in 2008. So Crossref was founded in 2000. So I would say that's quite an early start. And we also have some joining even just this year. And for members in Lithuania, we have over 60,000 content items registered with us. And you can see just a spread across some other countries in the region. What I would say is that in a lot of countries in Eastern Europe, we're seeing a lot of growth in terms of the volume of publishers, universities, and other organizations that want to work with Crossref. When I started working at Crossref in 2012, the majority of publishers that we worked with were in Western Europe, in the UK, and the United States. And we've now grown and have members in nearly every country in the world. So I want to make the point that it's a global database of research, and means that any country who registers their content in Crossref has as much chance as it being found as anybody else's. So I see this growth as a really positive thing in terms of the sharing and discovery of scholarly research. So in terms of what our members send to Crossref, this starts with basic metadata. So things that you would all associate easily with your publications: the titles, the author names, abstracts, references. So enough to distinguish, say, a journal article from any other journal article in the world. We're seeing an increased demand for members registering information on who funded the research, because funders want to know that. License information, so that you can see if a piece of content is open access or not. Links for our similarity check service that publishers use to try to check for any potential plagiarism. Crossmark for updates like corrections and retractions. And I know that Gabby's speaking later, but we've also seen a real growth in the number of publishers sending ORCID IDs to us with their researchers, which then helps update their ORCID record and gives more ways for their publications to be found. And we're also, things like peer review reports are being registered with Crossref, and we'll soon start to collect organisation IDs, so ways to identify specifically what institution an author or a contributor to a paper belongs to. So that's coming up. And this is a mix of the kind of services that use that metadata, and they do so for a variety of reasons, and I'll show some examples. But what those services want to do is to search and link citations to a work, so an author can see who else has gone on to use their research. To search and discover the content. I know that, as you said, we've got librarians on the call. So library discovery systems use the Crossref metadata to find research. Scholarly sharing networks can share content using the DOI, and also things like author profiling services. So this is just a little a small example of the types of things that people want to use the Crossref metadata for. So providing it in one place means that it spreads to all of the places where research is used. To give a couple of examples, at Crossref, we built a couple of search services on top of our metadata. So if you go to search.crossref.org, you can type in any information related to a paper, or you could enter the your ORCID if you have one, and you can run a search and see what you can find in the Crossref database. In this instance, someone's done a search by the University of Tromsø in Norway and find all of the papers that are associated with that have something in common. In this case, I can see that this is all the research that has been funded by that university, which is really useful for them to know. Another example is matching and linking citations. I don't know about you, but when I worked in research, some of the most painful things that I had to do are doing my reference lists or bibliographies. So tools like Authoria and other free tools will let you go enter a search term or a DOI and then just add those citations to your reference list in the format that you choose, to save all of the manual work in formatting that information and linking directly to the publication. So it can save researchers time and effort and ensure that their information is accurate. And it said, obviously, sometimes people think that Crossref is an indexing service, and I would say that's not entirely correct. But having content available in Crossref means that it can be aggregated and integrated into other databases. So one example is Unpaywall, which is an open database of scholarly articles. So they try to match up if there's a paid for article, they see if they can find maybe a preprint or an author copy in a repository, so that people can get access to that if they need it. And they use Crossref's metadata to identify and disambiguate over 20 million open access articles, so it's essential to their work. Many of you will also be familiar with DOIJ. Again, they use the Crossref metadata in order to back up information about publishers and the publications that are listed in that database. And we want to work more closely with DOIJ in future to make that process easier and less work for journals. We're also seeing increased interest in just to collect related research objects. So there's an increased interest in making sure that the data that underlies an article is available alongside the article, so that anyone who wants to reuse the research can check and make sure that maybe reuse the data, or to go into it in more depth. So it helps with measures like transparency and can also help researchers get credit for reusing their data. So the Dryad digital repository, they check for the availability of articles associated with their data packages. So they're trying to more accurately match data to publications is something else that people are using the information to do. So more links with things like peer reviews, data, and software that support research is something that we're really interested in helping. And On the broad scale, it helps us enable lots of collaborative projects and services, opening up abstract information, opening up citation information, being involved in other projects that work with identifiers like Freya or the Pidapalooza conference, which starts later today. And we also work a lot with other open infrastructure member organizations like PKP, DataCite, ORCID. So it's something that that helps us do more and see how we can work with different communities as well, because again that makes the impact of what we're all doing go even further. And another quick example, this is something that our colleagues at DataCite have worked on, and they've taken the metadata from Crossref, some from ORCID, and some of their own information, and also the information on institutions, and they've combined it into this early version of DataCite Commons. So what it's doing is it's combining metadata and information from lots of different places to be able to show institutions and funders and publishers how the work that they publish is related to funders, to data, and to institutions. So if you're an institution, it might help you see who's funding the research that your institution is publishing, or maybe who else your researchers are working with on their projects. So sometimes when I talk about Crossref metadata, it sounds very impressive. You know, if you talk about 120 million DOIs registered. But I think what I wanted to kind of make the case for today is that it's not really about the numbers. It's about how good the metadata that you send us is and how comprehensive. So this is my colleague's slide of a zebra, and her question is this what your Crossref metadata is like? Do you have this this complete animal? And I would say that a lot of people don't. So their Crossref metadata sometimes looks a little bit like this. So maybe they have the titles, ISSNs, but they don't have maybe information on all of the authors. Or it's funded by a particular funder, they don't have that information. Or maybe it hasn't been updated recently, so the content has moved to a new location and the member hasn't updated their metadata with us, so people then can't find the research. So we have some metadata like this, and we want to help our members make it better. So one tool that we have to try to help with that are our participation reports. So if you're online now or later today, you can go to the link in this slide, and I'm happy to share my slides. And you can type in your member name and take a look at the metadata that you've registered with Crossref. So as an example, I'm using Wiley because I've registered lots of content with us, and you can see that that's things like preprints, journal articles, some data sets, and lots of books, and one lonely conference paper. I can look in their individual journals, but then what I can also do is that we've identified 10 fields of metadata that we think are really important in terms of discoverability within the community. And a lot of these are things that I've spoken about already. So as I said, if I wanted to look at this for different content types. I could take a look at, I can use this to filter on them. If I want to learn more about the type of metadata, about the metadata field that I'm interested in, then I can go in and find out why it's important, where can I learn more, or how can I improve the score. So in this case, I'm looking at the Arctic University of Norway, and I can see that they only have references registered for 1% of their publications. So maybe that's something that they want to look into more. They can look in the individual journals that they've registered, and they can look for just current content, all time, or content published more than 2 years ago. I can see that, and I know that this, the university is, their content is open access. So I can see that they provided license information for 99% of the content that they've registered. So they have the license information in there, which is really useful because it means that anyone then knows how they can reuse the content. And they've got about 30% of content associated with ORCID IDs. And sometimes I've seen higher than that. But if you've been publishing for a while, I know that for older author information, you might not necessarily have an ORCID associated with that. But again, ORCID is something that we think is really useful, and the number of ORCIDs that are being registered with us is definitely growing a lot over time. So that's really positive. And I think the last thing I wanted to mention is open references. So for publishers who are registering reference metadata with Crossref, it's great if they can make that open via Crossref, and you just need to send us an email in order to do that. But making your references open mean that it can be used by lots of complementary services and help people find and link to your content. So this is kind of where we want to get to, and sort of turning the zebra into a bit of a unicorn, because helping our members get their content looking like this means that it's going to be easier for it to be found and used. So, okay, that sounds great. But we also understand that, lots of journal editors who work with Crossref, they don't have a lot of time to work on this, to send us metadata. You want to get your DOIs registered, and then you want to get on with the 20 other jobs that you have to do that day. So one thing that we do want to work on is making it even easier for our members to send us all of that information. Today, there are a couple of methods that you can use to do so. So you can upload an XML file at doi.crossref.org. So if you're familiar with working with XML, we have some sample files, and you can use those to create the metadata for your publications and just upload it with us. I find that a lot of our members aren't familiar with XML. I wasn't before I started to work at Crossref. So for them, there's the option to use a manual web deposit form, which is available at this link. And in it, you can just copy and paste information from the article, as I said, the title, authors, ORCID IDs, and the links to the content where it sits on your website. And you can use the web deposit form to hit a submit button and send that to us. So that will take the information you've put in manually, convert it over to XML, and register it in our system. And it will also send you back a completed XML file that it built for you. So that's a useful thing to kind of keep in your records in case you need to go back and update the metadata at a later date. again, I'll come back to how you can do that. A large number of the newer members who are joining Crossref use OJS or Open Journal Systems. And I know that some organizations in Lithuania also use OJS. We think the plugin is really good and really helpful. And we worked with PKP to develop the plugin maybe 5 years ago. But we are also planning to make improvements to it. But with the OJS plugin, you can go to the plugins gallery and you can enter your Crossref user ID, prefix, and password. And that will allow you to send the metadata on your published articles to Crossref and register DOIs for them. I've got a link to information on how you can install the plugin on the OJS website. So that's a good starting point. And then they also have support documentation in terms of how you can use it and places to ask questions. It's pretty simple to use and quite straightforward, but I have sometimes seen deposits fail, but our support team can help you with that if you don't think it's quite working correctly. We also have a tool called Metadata Manager that I've linked to here. And it kind of aims to be a more up-to-date version of the manual web deposit form. The web deposit form, you enter the information, submit it, and it's gone. Whereas Metadata Manager will hold it will hold records of the metadata that you've registered with Crossref so that you can go back, look at those records, and easily make updates in future. To talk a little more about our collaboration with OJS, the plugin for OJS to register DOIs with Crossref is compatible with version 2.4.5 and higher of OJS. That enables the deposit of DOIs or content registration, but it also provides a good set of article metadata. So not just the basics, it also contains abstracts, ORCIDs, and full text URLs for organizations who want to participate in Similarity Check, which, as I said, is the service to check for potential plagiarism. In versions 3.1 and later of OJS, there's also a plugin where you can match references to DOIs and then register them with Crossref. So that's a really good tool. And further improvements are coming in 2021. So that's user interface improvements to OJS to make the plugin more intuitive to use. Moving information on the references plugin and the plugin you can use to register funding information all to one place in the OJS system. And we've also agreed with PKP that we will work with them to develop a plugin to support our Cited By service. So Cited By will let you display on your journal website the other publications that you can see that cite one of your articles. And it will also better support it will also build in support for our Crossmark service, which, as I said, lets publishers communicate important updates like corrections and retractions in a standard way. So that's something we've wanted to do for a while, and we will run webinars and do other outreach once these improvements to OJS are put in place. We also know that mistakes happen. We're all human. So entering some incorrect metadata, forgetting an author, or as I said, if your content moves to a new website, that's all stuff that you can come back to Crossref and fix it. And there's no charge to update metadata associated with the DOI. So it's something that we really encourage our members to do, and not just to register something once and forget about it forever. Sometimes what I see is that someone will register a DOI and realize they've got something wrong, panic, and then just register another DOI for the same article. And we don't want people to do that for a number of reasons. One, financial. It means that you have to pay twice for 2 DOIs. And also it means then there are 2 metadata records in our system for exactly the same article. And all of those downstream services then get confused and might end up taking people who are searching for that piece of research to the wrong place. So you should always update the existing metadata, or if you're really stuck, we can take one of the DOIs and point it to the other one. Again, that's not ideal. Best practice is to update the information. And we don't delete DOIs either. Again, sometimes someone will register something incorrectly and ask us to delete it. The problem with something being a persistent identifier is that it is persistent. So the curation of the information in our database is much better than just deleting and changing and duplicating, like in every database that you work with. So I've linked to our education documents on updating that information. In terms of the types of the different interfaces, OJS lets you resend metadata to Crossref. So say you wanted to go in, add an ORCID, add an additional author, you could do that in the OJS interface and then hit the button to resend that metadata to Crossref. In the web deposit form, it's quite manual, so you enter the information that's on the article, including the existing DOI from the start, hit deposit, and that will overwrite the information that you already have in our system with the new metadata. So it won't duplicate the DOI, it will just update it. Metadata Manager, it keeps a record of the metadata you've registered. So again, you can log into that system, find the record that you want to correct, edit it, and resubmit it. I'm sorry that I don't have more time to show you the interfaces in detail, but we do have recorded demonstrations of both Web Deposit and Metadata Manager in our help documentation. And my colleague has written it. There's some good blogs about it as well on our website. And if you work with XML, you can update the information in your XML file and re-upload it to doi.crossref.org. And in a similar way, it will update the information we have with the new metadata and make that available via all of our systems. I think a big thing when I'm talking to people about Crossref, I think the big thing for me is always, if you get stuck, do ask for help. Don't just give up. We have a really good support team, Isaac, Shane, and Paul, who've just been joined by another colleague, Arlie, who is basically an expert on OJS, which is going to be really helpful. So do get in touch, and they'll be happy to help. We also have an open community forum, so a place where people can go and ask questions openly. And yes, our support team and Crossref staff will answer them, but also people from the community as well. We have AMAs, or what we call Ask Me Anything. So you can, it's a webinar without any structure. You can go on, and our support team will be in that session, and you can just come on and ask them specific questions about your journal or things that you're struggling with, and they'll be able to give you hands-on support. So that's a nice option as well. And then finally, we have a lot of education documents, and these were reissued in May this year. So they're a lot clearer and with more structure, and we want to continue to improve those. As I said, this is our new community forum, and we're going to launch it officially in the next month. But it's open already, and we have lots of our staff, our ambassadors, and other community members already using it to ask questions, share information on events, and to provide each other with technical support. So it's a good place to go to for updates and seeing if someone else has already asked the question that you have, which in my experience is normally the case. So this is what I wanted to come back to today. I wanted to make sure that we had time for questions. As I said, working on the metadata that you send Crossref just means that more people can find it in the communities and use the research that you publish in their own efforts. So that was everything that I wanted to cover in my presentation. But as I said, I'm happy to take any questions, comments, and I'm sure you've got lots of ideas. But again, thank you very much for the invitation to speak.
Thank you, Rachael, for detailed presentation. I was wondering how many staff members Crossref you have, if it's not a secret.
No, it's so we have. When I started at Crossref in 2012, we had 17 staff, and today we have, I think it's 39 or 40. Mm-hmm. So we're not, because we're a member organization, we try to work in quite, we try not to have tons and tons of staff, because then we have to pass, you have to pass that. So we try to keep our costs down so we don't have to pass costs on to members. But obviously we get lots of support from our members and our communities in terms of the work that we do. So we're really grateful for that.
Okay, thank you. And yes, we have some minutes for questions. If anybody have questions, just raise your hand or type a question in the chat. At the moment, I can see one question in the chat from Vincas Grigas. I will spell it. It is a huge issue to prepare a reference list in JATS DDT XML. Do you have or planning to prepare a tool to convert Crossref metadata into JATS DDT XML compatible reference list just by typing in DOI?
The short answer is that we do, and we want to make progress on that work this year. We know that a lot of the publishers that we work with use JATS or want to use JATS. So we've started to have a conversation with an agency to try to build some tools that will convert JATS to Crossref metadata and convert Crossref metadata back to JATS. So we hope that we will have something that will help with that this year. And I think the other thing as well is that we want to improve the functionality of our simple text query tool, where you can put in a list of references and match those to DOIs. But again, being able to output that in Crossref format or JATS would be something that we know would help members. But I know it is a pain, and we do want to put time and effort into developing something that will do that.
Okay, let's hope, because I suppose a lot of members are waiting for more tools. And here I can see a comment from Abia. Crossref, she said that Crossref support team is very best support team, and she is very grateful for all their help. So.
Thank you. No, I'll let them know that. They genuinely are great. So they'll be really pleased to hear.
And another one question, does Google Scholar or Microsoft Academic Search uses Crossref metadata?
So I know that I know that Microsoft Academic Search does use I know that they do use the Crossref metadata to, along with some other sources of metadata, to use that in their tool. Google Scholar doesn't officially use Crossref metadata, but we do make it openly available via our APIs. But there's the fact that it's Google means that we don't necessarily know. So they can use that to supplement their information, but we don't have like an official sort of partnership with them. Whereas Microsoft Academic Search do subscribe to use our metadata in their tools.
Thank you. And one more question about multilingual text, I suppose. Can users register multilingual metadata for the same DOI? Let's say we have same article to register here in Lithuanian and English language. I remember we have some issues in our press, in Vilnius University press, when we publishing some articles in 2 languages. It means we have to get 2 DOIs, but maybe it will be more logical to get just 1 DOI. What's your opinion? So
it's a really good question. And we do have a small group working at Crossref at the moment to work on issues that affect publications that are multilingual, and we have a lot of them. So we have a small working group looking at that, but within the metadata of 1 DOI, it's hard to provide the data in 2 languages. Like, I think we have things like alternative title, or you can provide the abstract in another language. As Vinka says, and as you say, the way to do that in the past that we've recommended has been to register a DOI for the English version and for the version, say, in Lithuanian. But we know that that's a problem because you have to pay for 2 DOIs. So not ideal. So what we will bring in this year is we're going to for a journal that publishes translations, we're going to remove the charge to register the translated version. So if you connect the article with the translation in the metadata, then we won't charge for that. We'll only charge once for the DOI because we want to encourage best practice. Because you might want to cite the the article in English in a different way that you would want to cite it in Spanish, for example. So we'll provide better support for multilingual metadata later this year, but in a way that doesn't penalize publications who want to follow best practice.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the payment is not the main problem. The bigger problem is when this databases is counting your articles and they are counting as 2 articles in both languages, for example. So, but yeah, let's hope something will change maybe in the future, or maybe not. Yeah, it's not so easy task, I suppose.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we're seeing a similar thing, because you would be able to relate the 2 articles in the Crossref metadata, but then, as you said, you need the indexing services down the line to combine that citation. And we're seeing the same a little bit with, there's some conversation around potentially like versions of articles. And I know that there are lots of conversations happening about, say, preprints as well. You know, because if you publish a preprint, maybe you put it in 2 places, you publish the article. How do you work with that citation information? Because we don't round that up in Crossref. But I know for, as you said, for translations, I think there's an argument to do so, because it's effectively the same work and you don't want to dilute that effect.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess we have no more questions, and I would like to thank you for your presentation. Thank you for joining our seminar, and let's work together in the future. And yeah, thank you, Rachael.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and now we have a short break. 5 minutes break just to prepare some coffee. So please do not disconnect from the Teams, and be back at 2 minutes past 11, please. So we can start with second sections. And now we have second part of our seminar. And the topic is ORCID in the research and publishing life cycle, an opportunity for openness and transparency. And I would like to invite our second speaker, ORCID ID Engagement Manager, Gabriela Mejias.
Hello.
Gabriela, hello. The floor is yours.
Very much, especially to Vinkas Grigas from Vilnius University Press. I'm Gabriela Mejias. I work at ORCID as the engagement manager for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Apologies for my messy background. I'm moving, so you'll see some packing boxes beneath me. I'm very happy to be here with you today, and I will introduce you to ORCID and how it can be implemented in the research life cycle. I hope you are seeing my slides. I'd like...
We can see it well.
Great. So I'd like to start with our vision, and that is a world where all those who participate and contribute to research and scholarship and innovation can be uniquely identified and also connected to their contributions and activities across disciplines, organizations, countries, and time. So for those of you new to ORCID, we are an open and non-profit organization, also a member-based organization as Crossref, and we were created by and for the research community. And we provide individuals with a unique persistent identifier, the ORCID ID, and that helps connecting them with their research contribution, with their affiliations, and with other information of how they engage with other organizations while doing research. And we provide open tools, so the ORCID IDs, the registry where all the data or the metadata is connected, and the APIs. So API stands for Application Programming Interface, and it's basically a tool that allows our registry to exchange information with external systems. And before we move on, why do we need a unique persistent identifier for individuals who contribute to research? And as you can see on the slide, names are not unique. And that's one of the reasons why we need identifiers to identify and connect researchers with their activities. Also, research is increasingly global, and researchers are mobile as they change from institutions, they migrate to different countries, etc. Not to mention name changes throughout their career. And this is why we need ORCID ID. So, yes, ORCID stands for Open Researcher and Contributor Identifier. And the O in ORCID stands for Open. And for us, that means many things. Openness and transparency are our key values. So that means free to use. And again, the ORCID IDs are free to register and free to use. The access to the registry for individuals is free, and organizations can also access all the public data on the registry for free once per year via our public data file. We aim to remove barriers to use and to access, and that is why there's no requirement to register an ORCID ID, and also participation in ORCID is open to any individual and to any organization. So currently we have institutional members in more than 50 countries. And again, we strive to be not only to enable transparency and trust in research infrastructure, but also to be a transparent organization. And that's why our policies on terms of use, on privacy, membership fees, etc., everything's available on our website. And we are also committed to release all the software we develop under an open source license. And this is how we envision research, how we envision a robust research infrastructure to be, and how we envision interoperability to be. So as you can see, the researcher is at the center with their ORCID ID, and they can connect this ID as they engage with publishers, for example, when submitting a manuscript, or as they interact with their institutional repository from their university and deposit their resource, or, for example, and increasingly, when applying for a funding or a grant. So as you can see there, this tool we provide, the API, allows organizations to collect ORCID IDs and integrate this data exchange as part of their workflows, and the data can flow automatically between systems, between organizations, across disciplines. As you can see, we work very closely with Crossref, and you've heard more about them from Rachel's presentation today. And we also work very closely with DataCite, which are organizations that serve as DOI registration agencies, but also develop other services related to scholarly communications. And to illustrate a little bit how both individuals and organizations can benefit using persistent identifiers for individuals as in the research lifecycle, help automating this data exchange of information, and this helps saving time and reducing errors, so improving reporting, and also it helps control your organization name if, for example, you connect affiliation data to an ORCID record and indicate that a researcher is currently affiliated with your organization. And for individuals, using ORCID IDs helps them be uniquely identified and connected, and also improve the discoverability of their research. And ideally, with this automation enabled by the API, individuals or researchers will be able to spend more time doing research and less time doing administration work. So ideally, that's also part of what we want to achieve to reduce the researchers' burden. And more importantly, ORCID provides this ORCID record associated to ORCID IDs that can help as a lifelong record of scholarly activities with trustworthy information. So just to, I wanted to mention this OECD report called Charting the Digital Transformation of Science. And on this report, they explore the key factors that help or promote the digitalization of research. And one of those factors highlighted in this report is digital identity in online environments and in the communication of scientific work. And these findings are based on a survey that was performed in 2018 with more than 12,000 people surveyed, working in many different disciplines across 60 countries, and more than half of the researchers surveyed in each country confirmed they were using ORCID IDs, positioning ORCID as the de facto identifier for researchers. So before we continue, I wanted to bring you some information about our community. Again, we are a nonprofit organization, and we cover our operational costs with membership fees. So Our members are a very important part of our community. Currently, we have more than 1,100 institutional members in more than 50 countries. And around 70% of our members join through a regional consortia. So we consider consortia groups of 5 or more non-profit organizations that come together to establish a community of practice around ORCID. And a very important part, obviously, of our community are our users. So currently we have more than 10 million IDs registered. And as Rachel was saying, it's not about quantity, but about quality. So obviously 10 million IDs is a big number, and we're very happy about it. Currently, we're working on improving also the metrics and the data we have from the activities in ORCID records. So hopefully in the future, we'll be able to move from speaking of registered IDs to speak of active ORCID records. But yes, currently we have a little bit more than 10.5 million IDs registered, and we have more than 11 million affiliation items, more than 60 million works, and that's how we called all the contributions that's possible to connect to ORCID records. Funding items, near 1 million of funding items have been connected. More than 3 million peer review activities. This data is being connected both by publishers and by funders, and I'll explain more about that later. And one of the things that makes ORCID unique is that as an open and neutral organization, we can interoperate and integrate with other systems, and that includes also integrating other identifiers for individuals. And currently we have close to 2 million of other person identifiers in the ORCID registry. So I was speaking about our regional consortia, and this is for you to see the regional consortia we have in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So as you can see, we have national consortia established in UK, in Norway, in Italy, Germany, Greece, France, and in 12 countries altogether in Europe. Currently, we're seeing increased interest to establish a consortia in Czech Republic and Poland. So hopefully those countries will come together as a community of practice and establish an ORCID consortium in the future to really have a coordinated approach towards ORCID adoption. I also wanted to bring you some numbers about adoption in Lithuania. So this is tricky. We don't have any institutional members in Lithuania, and when we have institutional members, it's easy for us to gather information, especially when we have a consortium. It's a little bit easier to keep track of the adoption in the country, because that's actually one of the things that consortia can do. Have a program around national adoption and keep a track of the records that are being used in that country. One of the metrics that can give us an idea on how many IDs there are in Lithuania is the number of IDs registered with a Lithuanian email domain, so .lt, and those are more than 5,000 currently. We estimate that the number could be higher because there might be many researchers using ORCID in Lithuania who are registered with a personal email address like Gmail or Hotmail, for example. But another metric is the visits to our website in the last year. And as you can see, in Lithuania, it's been more than 20,000 users or devices visiting the website, with more than 50,000 sessions. So how many times those users have accessed the registry. And this is based on Google Analytics stats. So yeah, hopefully next time I can bring you more concise data around this. And to move to the next part of the presentation and how all these data can be connected to ORCID records, it's very important that I speak about authentication. So what the APIs enable is to collect ORCID IDs in a system while or by requesting the user authorization or the user consent. And for us, this is very important because ORCID is researcher-centered, and researcher privacy and researcher consent are very important for us. So ideally, we do not want to see organizations asking researchers to type their IDs manually, because this can lead to many issues. For example, I can type the ID of someone else, or I can type incorrectly the ID. Instead of that, what we want to promote is authentication or the use of the API. So when you implement the API, you can have a button or a link for your users to connect their ID. When they click there, they need to sign into ORCID with their username and password. And then they will see a screen like this, like the one we're seeing on the slide, that when the user is signed in, it shows the name of the organization that wants to collect that ID and that wants to interact with that ID. So this is an example from the German National Library, and you can see the permissions they are asking for. And when the user clicks authorize on the backend of the application, your will obtain the ORCID ID, the first and last name, and other data will be returned with the API. And again, this helps ensuring that you have the correct ID for that person. And something related to user privacy is that we have 3 different levels of visibility on each item of the ORCID record. So the first level is public, meaning everybody can see this information on the registry and also via the API. And this is the most used.
We don't hear.
Unmute microphone, please.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. That's
It says someone is muting me, but hopefully now you can hear me. So we have on the ORCID registry public data. Most of the users select this public visibility as a default setting. The second level of visibility is trusted parties. This means that only ORCID member organizations that obtain authorization or the permission or the consent of the user can see this information. And then the last visibility setting is private. By default, all email addresses are set to private. The user can then change it, but most of them don't do. And this is because we follow GDPR guidance and are compliant with GDPR. So as you can see, also as a part of enabling this transparency on the account settings, the user can see which organizations are interacting or have collected their ID. And you can see the name of the organization, the date, the approval or the permission has been granted, and the permissions they have. So this is for the user to clearly understand who's interacting with their data. This is an example of that interoperability I was speaking about in action. So this is what we call auto update. And this is a functionality both Crossref and DataCite have developed to make it easier for researchers to have an ORCID record up to date, but also for their institutions and for the whole community. So this is a functionality that can be enabled if the researcher connects their ORCID ID, for example, when they submit a manuscript or when they deposit a data set, then if the ORCID ID is embedded in the metadata that the publisher, for example, registers with Crossref, then Crossref will read that ORCID ID in the metadata, will send a notification to that user asking them for permission to connect that data into their ORCID record. And if permission is granted, then automatically Crossref will connect data to that ORCID record every time someone registers a DOI with that ORCID ID in the metadata. And you can see on the slide an example from a Lithuanian journal, actually. This is an example from Vilnius University Press journals. They're collecting IDs using OJS, and they register DOIs with Crossref. So that's how this ORCID, this publication data has made it to that ORCID record. You can see the title of publication, the name of the journal, the work type. In this case, it's a journal article, the publication date. And you can see that the source of the data is not the individual themselves, but instead Crossref. So we believe that clearly showcasing the data provenance helps also increase transparency and trust, because we have an organization saying this individual has contributed to that publication. So we ask you to help us promote this functionality because it's very helpful to have researchers' records up to date and having this data automatically updated save them a lot of time. I was speaking about the APIs as this tool to enable the data flow or exchange between the ORCID registry and external systems. So just to let you know that we have two APIs, one that's public, that's free and available to all. For example, the one being used by the Vilnius University Press journals. So with this public API, you can obtain an ORCID ID and you can read or import data that's public on ORCID records. This is already something you can do for free. We also have a member API. This is a benefit for our institutional members, and this allows organizations to connect data to ORCID records with their name as the source of the information, and I'll show you some examples later on. And that member API has two tiers. basic and the premium one. So the premium one has an additional functionality called webhooks that basically allows the system to receive a ping or an alert every time something changes on an ORCID record. So after receiving this alert, your system can read that ORCID record again, see what's changed, and update your system. So this enables synchronization. And again, if you're interested in knowing more about the APIs, we have a lot of documentation available. We have two environments. So the production environment, that's where the more than 10 million IDs are registered and where the data is. But we also have a sandbox or testing environment that everybody can use for free. So maybe this is also a good starting point for those of you interested in implementing ORCID. And now it's time to talk about works, and this is how we called contributions on ORCID records. And we aim to move the discussion from authorship to contributorship in order to really help recognize a wide range of contributions associated to research. So currently, it's possible to add works manually, so the researchers can type this information. However, this is the least recommended option. Ideally, we want to see this data being connected to ORCID records from institutional repositories, from publishers, and from other organizations that currently have this information and can assert it in an ORCID record in a trusted way with the researcher's consent. It's also possible to add works by entering a DOI or an archive ID or a PubMed ID. If you enter the ID, then will automatically query and pre-populate the metadata. And it's also possible to connect this data through a BibTeX file as well. And something very useful is the direct import of other databases that I'll explain on the following slide. So I won't go into much detail, but I wanted to show you that it's possible that more than one source connects metadata about the same resource, like in this case. What we do is group all those works, all those items pushed by different sources together, providing that the works share the same identifier, in this case, for example, a DOI, and the relation self. So as you can see here, this item has been added more than once to my ORCID record, and it's grouped together because all the sources have included the same DOI and also the relation self. So this is for us, it's not a duplication because that work will be counted as one on the ORCID record. And for us, it means more credibility on that work because there are multiple different organizations saying this person has contributed to this resource. I also wanted to briefly mention that we currently support 43 different work types or contribution types, and this go again beyond journal articles. So we currently support, for example, book chapters, preprints, conference outputs, patents and software, and many more. And the same way we support a wide range of contributions, we also support a wide range of identifiers for those contributions. So the most popular being DOIs, handles, ISSNs, ISBNs, and archive and PubMed ID, but we also support many more. And we support different relations between an identifier and the object itself. So an identifier can identify only that object. In that case, the relation is self. But for example, for book chapters, an identifier can identify more than one resource. In that case, the relation would be part of. And we have a new relation type called version of, and implementing this kind of relation will hopefully allow pushing and connecting a work, for example, a peer-reviewed journal article with its preprint. And I'm also adding the links on the slide to our schema. So we use our own schema so that you can have examples of this when you have the slides. So I've mentioned these tools our member organizations have developed to make it easier for researchers to import their works from external databases. So currently we have 12 databases connected to ORCID records, and so users can import all this data in a faster way. And we have, for example, open access databases, and here is worth mentioning BASE. They are the Bielefeld academic search engine developed by the Bielefeld University Library in Germany, and they index many different sources. 60% of their content is open access, and among their sources, they have repositories, journals, and more. Currently, they have more than 30 source providers in Lithuania. So this is a good way for researchers in Lithuania to connect their information to their ORCID records. Go to search and link, select BASE, and import from there. And we also have systems like Redalic from Mexico connected in this way to ORCID. Scopus also offers this option, and some registration DOI registration agencies like Crossref, DataSite, and IRITI, which are based in Taiwan. And some of these systems also allow to not only to import works, but also to import other identifiers. So it's possible to import the ISNI identifier, the Scopus author ID, and for example, authority control files like the German National Library allows to import works from their catalog, but also the GND, which is the German authority control file. And again, an example of how that looks like in the ORCID record. And you can see that the source of information is myself via BASE, because I claimed that work from BASE and exported it or transferred it to my ORCID record. And Something that ORCID has also developed is recognition for review activities. This is an initiative that started around 2015, and for the metadata we based our schema is based on the CASRE peer review proposal, and something special around peer review in ORCID records is that this information can only be connected by member organizations or by trusted parties via the API. I cannot manually add a review activity into my ORCID record. Here, important to mention that Pablons allows to import or transfer this data to ORCID records. And they also have an auto update functionality. So every 2 weeks, if you have your Pablons profile connected to your ORCID record, every 2 weeks, they'll add any new review activity added to your ORCID records. And we support all kinds of reviews, anonymous reviews as well. The basic data or metadata is the ISSN to identify, for example, the journal. Hello, can you hear me? I'm seeing.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, I'm seeing a notification. Yes, this is one of the uses of ORCID recognized review activities for journal articles. We also have some funding organizations recognizing reviews for example, when reviewing proposals for grants or awards. So I brought an example from our ORCID New Zealand consortium that's led by the Royal Society Te Aparangi, and they developed a hub as a consortia. You can develop also tools to make it easier for institutions to connect and share data via ORCID. And as part of that project, they have some information about their members and the reviewers that help review grant proposals. And you can see this is recognized on the membership and service section of the ORCID record. More recently, last year, in November, UK Research and Innovation released a feature to also recognize their reviewers by connecting also review activities to ORCID records. So it's great to see peer review getting more recognition as a part of the scholarly record, and even greater to see that recognition in ORCID records. So to finalize, I wanted to bring you some overall data on the information we have on the registry, and for example, related to contributions. Again, we currently have more than 57 million of works or contributions connected to ORCID records. And overall, around 20% more than 20% of the ORCID records have at least, are connected at least with one work. And you can see that most of the works connected are journal articles. So there's still a lot of work to do as a community, because we cannot do this on our own, to improve the recognition for all kind of research outputs beyond publications. So we rely for this on you to register identifiers for all your research outputs, register DOIs for all those works and contributions of your researchers, as this will help this data to be more discoverable and findable, as Rachel said. But because there's also this connection between Crossref and ORCID, that can help get this data connected to the researchers that participated in those contributions. And also I brought some statistics so that you can see who are the ORCID members connecting this data, so that the ones connecting the highest number of works. And you can see Scopus, Researcher ID, and Crossref. So the Crossref auto-update integration has connected more than 5 million works, followed by Europe PubMed Central. And the last one, Crossref metadata search, is the search and link wizard. So that's not the auto update, but the tool users can start from within the ORCID record to import works from Crossref. So yeah, again, if you can help us promote this feature and also these tools to have better and more quality data on ORCID records. Also related peer review activities. So you can see that we have more than 3 million of individual review activities on ORCID records, which overall means that more than 4.5% of the ORCID records registered are connected with at least one peer review activity. And you can see that Publons is the organization with the highest number of reviews connected to ORCID records. So again, remember that Publons, if you connect your Publons profile to your ORCID records, and also if you deposit review data with Publons, this data can be connected to researchers' records if the researchers provide authorization. And also automatically every 2 weeks, they will send new review activities to ORCID records. And also to mention funding and the funding workflow, as this is also a part of the research life cycle to obtain help and funding for doing your research. So we have close to 1 million of funding items in ORCID records, and you can see the progression by year from 2014 until today. And you can also see that most of the funding items connected are or refer to grants, followed by contracts and awards, and also followed by salary awards. There's also a way of importing this data directly to ORCID records via the dimensions wizard. So users can sign into their ORCID record and import all the funding data they have on dimensions, and the source of the data will be the dimensions. This is a very helpful tool for researchers, and institutions can also develop tools to connect this data. For example, FCT in Portugal, the Foundation for Science and Technology in Portugal, they developed an integration with their national CV system called Ciência Vitae, and they are also connecting a lot of funding data into ORCID records. This is something that can be implemented by other organizations as well. And if you're interested in this, happy to add the workflow, the documentation on how to implement this on the slide. And something that Rachel emphasized very nicely is that, again, public data in ORCID records means that all that data or metadata is open and available in for the community to use. So every year for the Open Access Week, we release a snapshot of or our public data file, which is a snapshot of all the data, all the public data on ORCID records. And this is we deposit this on our Figshare repository. We generate a DOI for it, and this is released under a CCO license, meaning everyone can benefit from the data on ORCID records, and we have examples from researchers doing using the public data file from ORCID to do research on, for example, research mobility by looking at the affiliation data on ORCID records. And there are also organizations can also build services on top of the public data file. And for example, Open Air, which is an ORCID institutional member, uses our public data file. As a member organization, they can obtain daily access to the public data file to integrate this data into the Open Air research graph. But just for you to know that this is also open metadata is also an important characteristic and service organizations like Crossref and ORCID offer, because at the end the whole community can access this, but also benefit from it. And speaking of benefits and the community, also wanted to give you bring you some statistics on the diversity of the data connected into ORCID records. So as you can see in terms of metadata languages, English is the predominant language. But we also have other languages like Spanish and Portuguese, German, Russian. And something important to say here is that we support all kind of characters. As long as they are UTF-8 encoded, it's possible to push data in multiple languages. And as you can see, we connect there are many other individual identifiers connected into ORCID records, and we are open to work with any organization that wants to connect data to ORCID records. So by sharing your connections and the information you have about your researchers with their consent and their authorization, we built a better research infrastructure, and again, at ORCID, we have some metadata requirements to write data into ORCID records. One of those is an identifier related, for example, to works, for affiliations, an identifier referring to the organization. And the data provenance is always clearly indicated. So anyone reading data from ORCID or coming to the registry can see who's the source of the data. And we hope that this helps this kind of trustworthy and transparent connections help us increase transparency also in research infrastructure. And again, all the data that's connected to ORCID records can be reused by anyone in the community as we share this data for everyone during Open Access Week. So I hope this was useful and triggers your interest. And for those of you wanting to know more, we are open for you to join us and as institutional members, or to use our public API and start your integration in that way. And hopefully you can participate, and you can help us achieve our vision in reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriela, for your presentation. And I see we have few questions already. First question is from Professor Rimantas Jankauskas. What are ORCID advantages to compare with Scopus Author ID or Claritative Analytics Web of Science Researcher ID?
Yes, so the main advantage, I would say, is that ORCID is interoperable, right? And in fact, interact with Scopus identifiers. So it's possible to connect a Scopus ID to an ORCID ID. Web of Science comes to reads ORCID data daily to add works to their database. And researcher ID / Pablons is also connected to ORCID. So by being an open and neutral organization, we can work with organizations across the whole research landscape, and we want to work with all kinds of organizations. So the benefit is that yes, we by using ORCID, it's possible to increase interoperability and avoid silos, because as an open organization, we are happy to work with anyone that wants to read data from ORCID or add information to ORCID records.
Okay, thank you. The second question is from Jolanta Kaun. Is there a connection with Primo or Aleph? I suppose it's librarian systems.
I'm not sure about that one. ProQuest, which is the organization developing Aleph, they are an ORCID institutional member, and I'm not sure if they are working on an integration with this system. As far as I know, there's not, but I can check on that and yeah, let you know per email.
Okay, thank you. The third question is from Professor Nijolė Radavičienė. She's saying that ORCID is a great tool and believe it will help to navigate in mega chaos of scientific publishing in the future. And she is asking that by her impression is that it is worth to register with ORCID only for the scientists at the beginning of their career. A scientist in the middle of his or her career gets rather poor picture of his or her scientific profile. For example, the journal Nijolė Radavičienė is editing has full archive since 1968 with DOIs registered for each object. And is not ORCID going to cover all the documents with registered DOIs to assure the full and I would say fair profiles of scientists registered with ORCID? As I understand, the question is it the scientists with greater career gets covered all their publications, starting from, the era before the internet even?
That's a very interesting question. Thank you so much. So I think, just to remark that we have many DOIs, and most of DOI is the most popular identifier for works on ORCID records. But we also support other identifiers for contributions as handles, ISSNs, ISBNs. So we aim to support as many identifiers as possible to reflect the diversity and the many different use cases of our community. And I think it is true that ORCID might not be able to cover the full picture for those researchers in the more advanced in their career, taking into consideration this point. But an ORCID is not perfect, but we're trying to make progress and to improve the recognitions going forward. So I think it's still a very valuable tool in that respect.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. As I understand, if some old article have an DOI, for example, so it could be included into ORCID account. So it's no problem. Maybe in some ways it's supposed to be, it has to be done manually, but still it's a possibility to include for each researcher.
Yes, correct.
And the last question from Vincas Grigas. Does ResearchGate, academia, and similar organizations has some agreements with ORCID to graph new registered items and to publish in their platforms?
Thank you for this question. And no, ResearchGate and academia are not ORCID members, nor is Google Scholar. We're open to work with any organization that wants to cooperate with us. So currently not, but yes, hopefully in the future we can do more together.
Mm-hmm. And one more question from Vincas. How do you solve issue of so-called dead or incorrect accounts?
Yes. Incorrect accounts, do you mean duplicated IDs, if I understand correctly?
Or maybe, you know, false identities.
Okay, so yeah, I think this deserves a longer answer. So to avoid that issue of collecting an incorrect ID, that's why we recommend to use the API, because then a person doesn't have to manually enter a number, but instead they need to sign in to that ORCID record. To do this, they need to enter their passwords. So you can be 100% sure, if you collect this information with the API, that that person, that ORCID ID belongs to that person, because they need to enter the password to be able to give you permission. So that's why we are very always, we strongly encourage all organizations to not collect IDs manually, but rather use the API. That being said, there are, for example, publishers collecting IDs manually. And in those cases, sometimes there's an incorrect ID connected to a DOI. Luckily, Crossref has a workflow, a support workflow to correct this. So when we receive a report from a user saying my ID has been included in this DOI and I'm not a contributor in this publication, we contact Crossref support. We report this issue, and they also get in touch with the publisher and explain how to update the metadata so that that ID is removed from that or from the DOI metadata, and if needed, from the ORCID record. Also, there's duplication of IDs is an existing issue. And that's why we want organizations to connect data to ORCID record, include ORCID in their workflows, so that researchers can really see the benefit, get used to ORCID, and keep reusing their ORCID record. Because sometimes what happens is that researchers register because they need, in a hurry, because they need to submit a manuscript, and then they forget about that ID, and then next time they need to submit a manuscript, they create a second one or a duplicated. So to avoid this issue, whenever someone registers an ORCID ID, we do a name check and an email address check. So if that email address is already in our registry, it's not possible to register two IDs with the same email address. So that's a way we're trying to avoid duplication. We also check the names. So if you're trying to register an ID under a name that's already on the registry, we also will show a message saying there's already these IDs registered for this name, and we show the affiliation data, and we recommend that person to sign in to that ORCID record instead of registering a new one. However, if there are two or more duplicated IDs, we also have a functionality from the account settings where users can unify identifiers. So they can merge two different IDs into one. There will be one ID that will be deactivated, and all the data from that ID will be removed, except from the email address that will be sent or transferred to the primary ID. So that's one way of doing this. If you have multiple IDs, but you're not sure and would like further help, it's always possible to contact our support team as well. I'm sharing the link on the slide. And yes, I hope I've answered that question.
Yeah. Thank you. And one more question from Nijolė Radavičienė. If a paper gets retracted, will that fact be automatically registered with that paper record on ORCID? Or the publisher has to take care of that to write to ORCID? Do you have any experience with retracted articles?
That's a great question, and it relates also a little bit to what Vinkas was raising, I think. And the good thing, we don't have any automatic mechanism in place if a paper has been retracted to remove that data from the ORCID record. But we do have a privacy policy and also a dispute procedure. So if you see, for example, incorrect data on an ORCID record, or if you think this is being used in a fraudulent way or to commit fraud, you can report it to us. We have an ombudsperson, and in those cases, we'll contact the publisher and try to check the identity of the researcher, check the veracity of the false claims, and if that happens, and if the ombudsperson, which is our executive director, agrees, then we can remove the incorrect or false data from the ORCID record. But we don't have an automated mechanism to do this. Obviously, if the publisher is aware of the retraction, they can always contact Crossref and update the metadata, for example, and remove that ID from the metadata, so that this connection between the DOI and the ORCID ID will be removed.
Yeah, thank you. And you also, the support of ORCID is always ready to answer all problems and questions. Yeah, so I think I would like to thank you, Gabriela, for your detailed presentations. And our seminar is going to end. And for the final word, I would like to invite the president of our Association of Lithuanian Serials, Vincas Grigas, to say just a few final remarks.
Thank you, Aruna. So I would like to say many thanks to Rachael and Gabriela. Good to have a deep look on how scholarly communication works nowadays. And we hope to work with you again on future projects. And best wishes to you. Thank you, Gabriela. And now I'm switching to Lithuanian. Tai sveiki gyvi, tai labai dėkoju, kad dalyvavote šiame seminare. Gausus dalyvių skaičius, tai yra puikus atpildas už įdėtą darbą organizuojant seminarą. Ir noriu pranešti, kad tai tikrai ne paskutinis seminaras.
Garsą. Vincai, garsą išjungi.
Aha, kažkas išjungė, nutildė. Nežinau, nuo kurios vietos nesigirdėjo, tai noriu pranešti, kad tai ne paskutinis seminaras. Gegužės mėnesį esam suplanavę seminarą apie profesionalias mokslo periodikos publikavimo platformas. Taip pat tikimės, kad pasiūlysite jums aktualių temų ateities seminarams. Na ir žiūrėsime, ką galime įgyvendinti. Ir naudodamasis progą noriu padėkoti prie šio seminaro įgyvendinimo aktyviai prisidėjusiems Tomui Martyšiui, Ingai Šoblinskienei, Rasai Milerytei, Arūnui Gudinavičiui ir Vygaudui Jozaičiui. Taigi, dėkoju ir iki kitų susitikimų. Gero sniego, pasibraidimo.
Ačiū visiems dalyvavusiems. Iki kitų kartų.
Ačiū už seminarą.